She walked into the Veterans Center that Tuesday morning, just like any other day. Coffee in hand, clipboard tucked under her arm, ready for another routine counseling session. But the whispers followed her down the hallway. They always did. The new guy sitting in the waiting area looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on the colorful sleeves that peeked out from beneath her rolled-up blazer. A smirk played across his weathered face as he nudged his buddy. "Check out the artwork on the counselor," he chuckled, not bothering to lower his voice. "What's next? Face tattoos? Why so inked, lady?" The room fell silent. Every veteran in that waiting area knew her story, but this newcomer didn't. He had no idea that the woman standing before him had earned every single mark on her skin in ways that would humble the strongest among them. He didn't know that those tattoos weren't just ink. They were medals of honor written in a language most would never understand. What happened next would become legend in veteran circles across the country. Because when she turned around and began to speak, her quiet words would shake something loose in every person present. They would learn that sometimes the most powerful warriors don't look like what you expect. Sometimes they're covered in tattoos that tell stories of sacrifice, survival, and service that run deeper than any uniform. This is the story of Sarah Chun, and how one thoughtless comment revealed a truth so powerful it would change how an entire community saw strength, sacrifice, and what it really means to serve your country. Sarah Chun had always been different. Growing up in a small town in Oregon, she was the girl who climbed trees higher than the boys, who never backed down from a dare, and who spent her afternoons reading military history while other kids played video games. Her parents, immigrants from Taiwan who had built a successful restaurant business from nothing, often worried about their daughter's fascination with all things military. "Sarah, why are you always reading about wars?" her mother would ask, setting down a plate of homemade dumplings. "You should focus on school. Maybe become doctor or engineer like your cousin Jimmy." But Sarah's mind was already made up. From the age of 12, when she watched a documentary about Navy SEALs, she knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life. The problem was in 2010, women weren't allowed in combat roles. The SEALs were an all-male unit, and that seemed like it would never change. That didn't stop Sarah from preparing. She started running 5 miles every morning before school. She learned to swim in a local lake, even when the water was so cold her lips turned blue. She studied military tactics, learned basic first aid, and even convinced her parents to let her take mixed martial arts classes at the community center. "She's like a little soldier," her father would tell customers at the restaurant, pride mixed with confusion in his voice. Always training for something. High school was a blur of academic excellence and physical preparation. Sarah graduated valedictorian while maintaining a workout schedule that would have exhausted most adults. Her classmates called her intense, but she didn't care. She had a goal that burned brighter than any teenage social drama. The day after graduation, she walked into the Navy recruitment office. The recruiter, a weathered chief petty officer named Martinez, looked up from his paperwork as the 18-year-old girl approached his desk. "I want to be a Navy SEAL," Sarah announced without preamble. Chief Martinez had heard it all before. Young people came in every day with dreams bigger than their understanding of military life. But something about this girl's steady gaze made him take notice. "Well, miss, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but women aren't eligible for SEAL training. However, the Navy has plenty of other opportunities for someone with your obvious determination." Sarah had expected this response. She'd done her research. "I understand the current restrictions, Chief, but I also know that change is coming. I want to be ready when it does. What's the best path to prepare?" Martinez was impressed despite himself. Most recruits who came in asking about elite units had no real understanding of what they were asking for. This girl had clearly done her homework. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "if you're serious about this, you'd want to start with a rate that would give you the best foundation. Intelligence specialist, maybe hospital corpsman, or even naval special warfare support. Build your credentials, prove yourself, and who knows what the future might hold." Sarah chose intelligence specialist. It would give her access to the kind of strategic thinking and problem-solving skills that special operations demanded. More importantly, it would put her in contact with the special operations community, even if she couldn't be a direct part of it yet. Basic training at Great Lakes was everything she had prepared for her, and nothing like she expected. The physical demands were challenging, but manageable. She had been training harder than this for years. The mental pressure, however, was something entirely different. Chun, what makes you think you belong here? Drill instructor Petty Officer Williams screamed in her face during her third week. Because I've earned it, Petty Officer Williams. Sarah screamed back, her voice hoarse but unwavering. The other recruits in her division quickly learned that Sarah wasn't just another college kid looking for adventure. She woke up earlier than required, stayed up later studying manuals, and helped struggling classmates with everything from physical training to academic work. By the end of basic training, even the drill instructors had grudging respect for the quiet girl from Oregon who never quit. Intelligence Specialist A School was where Sarah truly began to shine. The technical aspects of intelligence gathering, analysis, and dissemination came naturally to her. She absorbed everything like a sponge, from satellite imagery interpretation to human intelligence collection techniques. Her first assignment was to Naval Special Warfare Group 2 in Virginia Beach. She wasn't a SEAL, but she was working alongside them, providing intelligence support for their operations. For the first time since enlisting, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The SEALs she worked with initially viewed her with the same skepticism they showed any new support personnel. In their world, trust was earned through shared hardship and proven competence. Sarah understood this and never tried to force her way into their inner circle. Instead, she focused on being exceptional at her job. Her first real test came 6 months into her assignment. A high-priority mission required real-time intelligence analysis during an overseas operation. Sarah was assigned to the operations center, monitoring communications and satellite feeds, while a SEAL team conducted a raid in hostile territory. 3 hours into the operation, the team encountered unexpected resistance. The intelligence they had been working with was outdated, and they were walking into a trap. Sarah noticed the discrepancies in the communication patterns and vehicle movements on her screen. "Sir," she called to the operations officer, "I'm seeing movement that doesn't match our original intel. There are at least 15 additional hostiles in Building 3. The operations officer glanced at her screen and immediately got on the radio to the team leader. Sarah's analysis allowed the team to adjust their approach and avoid a potentially deadly ambush. When the team returned safely with their objective complete, the team leader sought her out. "Good work, Chun. You might have saved some lives tonight." Word of Sarah's performance spread quickly through the tight-knit special operations community. She began receiving requests specifically for her analytical support on missions. The SEALs who had initially ignored her started including her in mission briefings and asking for her input during planning sessions. But Sarah wanted more than just the support from the sidelines. Every day, she watched the SEALs train, deploy, and return with stories of missions that tested every aspect of their training. She wanted to be out there with them, not watching from a screen in an air-conditioned operations center. The breakthrough came in 2015 when Defense Secretary Ash Carter announced that all combat positions would be open to women, provided they could meet the standards. Sarah had been in the Navy for 5 years, had proven herself repeatedly in intelligence operations, and had maintained her physical conditioning throughout her service. "I want to try for SEAL training," she told her commanding officer, Captain Rodriguez, during her annual review. Captain Rodriguez had been expecting this conversation. He had watched Sarah's career closely and had nothing but respect for her capabilities. But he also understood the reality of what she was asking. "Chun, you know what you're asking for here. The failure rate for male candidates is over 80%. The physical standards are brutal, and that's before you even get to the mental pressure. Plus, you'd be the first woman to attempt it. The spotlight on you would be intense." "I understand, sir, but I've been preparing for this for 15 years. I'm not asking for any special treatment or modified standards. I just want the chance to try." Captain Rodriguez studied her for a long moment. He had served with many exceptional sailors in his career, but few had shown the consistent dedication and competence that Sarah had demonstrated. All right, Chun, I'll recommend you for SEAL training. But understand that once you start, there's no going back. You'll either succeed or fail on the same terms as every other candidate. Are you ready for that? Yes, sir. I've been ready my whole life. The paperwork took months to process. Sarah used the time to intensify her training even further. She worked with a former SEAL who had transitioned to civilian life as a trainer, pushing her physical conditioning to levels she had never achieved before. You know what you're getting into? The trainer, a grizzled former chief named Davidson, asked her during one particularly brutal workout session. "I know it's going to be the hardest thing I've ever done," Sarah replied between bursts on the heavy bag. "But I also know I belong there." Davidson had trained dozens of SEAL candidates over the years. Most of them talked a good game, but few had the quiet determination he saw in Sarah. She didn't boast about what she was going to do. She just showed up every day and did the work. When the orders finally came through, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and terror. She was going to Coronado, California, to attempt basic underwater demolition/SEAL training. She would be in Class 319, starting in just 6 weeks. Her parents flew out from Oregon for her going-away party. Her mother still didn't fully understand her daughter's choices, but she had learned to be proud of them. "You be careful, okay?" her mother said, hugging her tightly. "You call us every chance you get." "I will, Mom. And don't worry. This is what I was meant to do." As Sarah packed her gear for the cross-country drive to California, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the 12-year-old girl who dreamed of becoming a SEAL to the seasoned intelligence specialist about to attempt the most challenging military training in the world, every step had led her here. She had no illusions about what lay ahead. Bud/S would test every aspect of her physical, mental, and emotional strength. She would be scrutinized, doubted, and pushed beyond anything she had ever experienced. But she was ready. The drive to Coronado took 2 days. Sarah stopped at various military bases along the way, sleeping in temporary lodging and thinking about the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. She wasn't just trying to become a SEAL for herself. She was carrying the hopes and dreams of every woman who had ever been told that some things were just for men. When she finally saw the Pacific Ocean and the distinctive red-roofed buildings of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, Sarah knew her life was about to change forever. She was no longer just Sarah Chun from Oregon. She was a SEAL candidate, about to begin the most challenging chapter of her already remarkable journey. The first tattoo would come later, after Hell Week, when she earned the right to wear the SEAL Trident. But the story that would make veterans rise to their feet in respect was just beginning. The moment Sarah stepped onto the grinder at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, she felt the weight of history on her shoulders. The concrete courtyard had witnessed thousands of SEAL candidates over the decades, most of whom never made it through the brutal selection process that awaited them. Now, for the first time in the program's history, a woman stood among the hopefuls. Class 319 began with 178 candidates. Sarah knew from her research that fewer than 30 would likely graduate. The statistics were sobering, but she had long ago made peace with the possibility of failure. What mattered was giving everything she had to the attempt. The instructors made no effort to hide their skepticism about her presence. Master Chief Ramirez, the senior enlisted advisor for the training program, addressed the class on their first day with his usual bluntness. "Gentlemen," he began, then paused, his eyes finding Sarah in the formation. "And lady, you are about to begin the most demanding military training in the world. Some of you think you know what that means. You don't. Most of you will quit before Hell Week. Most of those who make it to Hell Week will quit during Hell Week. Those few who survive will spend the next 18 months proving they deserve to wear the Trident." The early weeks of training were a relentless cycle of physical training, swimming, running, and boat handling. Sarah quickly distinguished herself in the academic portions of training, but the physical demands tested even her well-conditioned body in new ways. The log PT sessions were particularly challenging. Teams of 6 to 8 candidates would carry telephone poles weighing over 150 pounds through various exercises. Sarah's smaller stature meant her teammates had to compensate for the height difference. But her determination never wavered. "Chun, you're holding us back," grumbled Rodriguez, a former Marine from Texas, after a particularly difficult log carry. "Then, help me get better instead of complaining about it," Sarah shot back, her face red with exertion, but her voice steady. The exchange marked a turning point. Instead of seeing her as a liability, her teammates began to recognize her refusal to quit as an asset. During the endless hours of training, when muscles screamed and minds begged for rest, Sarah's presence became a reminder that giving up wasn't an option. The ocean phase of training introduced candidates to the cold Pacific waters that would become a constant companion. Sarah had trained in cold water before, but nothing had prepared her for the systematic hypothermia that was part of the SEAL selection process. During one particularly brutal surf passage exercise, candidates were required to link arms and walk through the pounding waves for 2 hours. The instructors watched from the beach, looking for any sign of weakness or surrender. 20 minutes into the exercise, Sarah began shivering uncontrollably. The icy water had penetrated every layer of her wet suit, and her core temperature was dropping rapidly. Rodriguez, who had initially doubted her, moved closer to help share body heat. "Stay with us, Chun. We're all in this together." The solidarity that emerged during these shared sufferings was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. These men, who came from every conceivable background and had initially questioned her right to be there, were now literally keeping her warm so the team could complete the mission. But it was Hell Week that would truly test everything Sarah believed about herself. Hell Week began on a Sunday night with Breakout, a chaotic event designed to shock candidates into the reality of what lay ahead. Sarah stood with the remaining 89 candidates of Class 319 as instructors set off explosions, fired blank ammunition, and shouted instructions through bullhorns. "This is it, Chun," she told herself as the mayhem erupted around her. "This is what you've been preparing for your entire life." The next 5.5 days blurred together in a haze of constant activity, sleep deprivation, and physical punishment. Candidates were allowed a total of 4 hours of sleep during the entire week, broken up into brief naps between exercises. Sarah's first major crisis came on Tuesday afternoon. After 36 hours with no sleep and constant physical activity, she found herself struggling during a timed swim. Her stroke became sloppy, her breathing erratic. The safety swimmers were preparing to pull her from the water when something inside her refused to surrender. "I am not quitting," she said aloud, even though her mouth was full of salt water. "I am not quitting." She finished the swim within the time standard, but barely. That night, during a rare 10-minute break, Rodriguez approached her. "Chun, nobody would blame you if you rang out. You've already made history just by getting this far." Sarah looked at him with eyes red from salt water and exhaustion. "I didn't come here to make history, Rodriguez. I came here to become a SEAL. History is just a side effect." Wednesday brought the famous around-the-world exercise, a boat race around Coronado that tested teamwork, navigation, and willpower. Sarah's boat crew was struggling, consistently finishing in the bottom half of races. The instructors were paying particular attention to their performance, looking for cracks in the team's resolve. During one portage, carrying their heavy inflatable boat across the beach, Sarah stumbled and fell. The boat came down on top of her, pinning her to the sand. Her teammates immediately lifted the boat and helped her up. "You okay, Chun?" asked Patel, a former college football player from California. "I'm fine. Let's go." But she wasn't fine. Sarah had twisted her ankle in the fall, and each step sent shooting pain up her leg. She said nothing to the instructors or her teammates. Hell Week was no place for injuries, minor or otherwise. For the next 2 days, Sarah ran, swam, and carried heavy equipment on an ankle that was swollen to twice its normal size. Her teammates noticed her limping, but said nothing. They understood that mentioning an injury would only draw unwanted attention from the instructors. Thursday night brought the dreaded steel pier exercise. Candidates were required to lie down on the cold steel pier, soaking wet, while instructors sprayed them with hoses. The combination of wind, water, and steel created a torture that tested mental resilience more than physical endurance. Sarah lay on the pier, her body shaking uncontrollably from hypothermia, her injured ankle throbbing with each heartbeat. Around her, she could hear the sounds of classmates ringing the bell to quit. Each ring echoed across the base like a death knell for another dream. "This is temporary," she told herself, repeating a mantra she had developed. "Pain is temporary. Quitting is forever." The instructor standing over her seemed to sense her internal struggle. "Chun, you're shaking like a leaf. Why don't you just ring the bell and get some hot coffee? This isn't worth it." Sarah forced herself to stop shivering through pure will. She looked up at the instructor with eyes that burned with determination. "Respectfully, this is exactly what it's worth, instructor." The instructor studied her for a moment, then moved on to find easier targets. Friday morning brought the final major event of Hell Week, the Mud Flats exercise. Candidates low-crawled through freezing mud for hours, their bodies covered in the thick, cold muck. Sarah's injured ankle screamed with every movement, but she kept pace with her teammates. As the sun rose on Friday, painting the sky pink and gold, Sarah realized she was going to make it. Hell Week was almost over, and she was still there. Of the 178 candidates who had started Class 319, only 23 remained. Sarah Chun from Oregon was one of them. When the instructors finally called an end to Hell Week, the surviving candidates stood in formation, swaying from exhaustion but still upright. Master Chief Ramirez addressed them with something that almost resembled respect. "Congratulations. You have completed Hell Week. You are no longer candidates. You are students. But understand this. Hell Week was just the entry exam. The real training starts now." Sarah's teammates surrounded her, offering congratulations and disbelief. She had done it. She had not only survived Hell Week, but had earned the respect of men who had initially doubted her right to be there. That weekend, during their brief recovery period, Sarah finally sought medical attention for her ankle. The x-ray showed a hairline fracture that had been present since her fall on Wednesday. "How were you walking on this?" the base doctor asked, staring at the images. "One step at a time," Sarah replied. The doctor wanted to remove her from training for recovery, but Sarah refused. She had come too far to let an injury stop her now. Instead, she was fitted with a walking boot and ordered to report any worsening of symptoms. The remaining phases of BUD/S tested different aspects of SEAL capabilities. The dive phase pushed candidates to their limits underwater, testing their ability to stay calm in life-threatening situations. Sarah excelled in this phase, her years of swimming training and mental preparation paying dividends. During one particularly challenging pool exercise, candidates were required to perform underwater knot tying while instructors tried to drown them by removing their masks and air supplies. Sarah's calm under pressure impressed even the most skeptical instructors. The land warfare phase was where Sarah's intelligence background truly shone. The tactical problems, map reading, and mission planning came naturally to her. She began to emerge as a leader among the remaining candidates, her analytical mind and refusal to quit inspiring confidence in her classmates. But it was during advanced training that Sarah faced her greatest test yet. The class was participating in a live fire exercise when candidate Morrison, a former Army Ranger, stepped on an improvised explosive device during a night mission. The explosion was powerful enough to be heard for miles. Sarah was the first to reach Morrison, who was unconscious and bleeding heavily from shrapnel wounds to his legs. Her medical training from her intelligence days kicked in immediately. "I need a medic over here," she shouted while applying pressure to Morrison's wounds. "And give me a tourniquet." For the next 10 minutes, while medical personnel made their way to the remote training location, Sarah kept Morrison alive. She stopped the bleeding, monitored his vital signs, and talked to him constantly to keep him conscious when he came to. "Stay with me, Morrison. Your wife is expecting you to come home. Remember? You told us about the baby on the way." Morrison survived and eventually made a full recovery. When he returned to training months later, he sought out Sarah to thank her. "Chun, I owe you my life. If you hadn't been there, hadn't known what to do, you don't owe me anything, Morrison. We're teammates. That's what teammates do. The incident cemented Sarah's reputation within the special operations community. She wasn't just the first woman to make it through SEAL training. She was a warrior who had proven herself under the most demanding circumstances possible. Graduation from BUD/S was held on a beautiful California morning in front of families, friends, and military leadership. Sarah stood with the 17 other graduates of Class 319, the culmination of a dream that had begun 15 years earlier in Oregon. Admiral Thompson, the Naval Special Warfare Command commander, presented each graduate with their SEAL Trident. When he reached Sarah, he paused. Petty Officer Chun, you have made history here. But, more importantly, you have proven that warrior spirit knows no gender boundaries. Wear this trident with pride, because you have earned it. Sarah's parents had flown in from Oregon for the ceremony. Her mother, who had never fully understood her daughter's military obsession, wept openly as the trident was pinned to Sarah's uniform. That night, the new SEALs celebrated at a local bar popular with the special operations community. Sarah's classmates presented her with a custom beer mug engraved with first but not last. To Chun, Rodriguez raised his glass, who showed us that strength isn't measured in pounds lifted or miles run. It's measured in refusal to surrender. As the celebration continued around her, Sarah stepped outside to call her childhood friend Jessica. I did it, Jess. I'm actually a Navy SEAL. I never doubted it for a second, Jessica replied. You always said you would be. What's next? Sarah looked up at the California stars, thinking about the question. Now I prove I belong here. The training is over. The real work begins. She had no idea that the real work would test her in ways that BUD/S never could, or that her story was just beginning to unfold in ways that would inspire an entire generation of warriors. Sarah's first assignment as a fully qualified Navy SEAL took her to SEAL Team 5 in Coronado, where she would spend the next 6 months in advanced training before her first deployment. The scrutiny that had followed her through BUD/S intensified as she prepared for real-world operations. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, the team's officer in charge, had initial reservations about integrating a female operator into his unit. Not because he questioned her abilities, but because he understood the challenges she would face in a community that had been exclusively male for over 50 years. Chun, you've proven you can handle the training. But operations are different. You'll be working in cultures where women are rarely seen as equals, with indigenous forces who may not accept your authority, and in situations where your presence could complicate mission dynamics. Are you prepared for that? Sarah had thought about these challenges extensively. She understood that her gender would be both an asset and a liability in different situations. Sir, I understand the complexities, but I also know that diversity of thought and approach can be a tactical advantage. I'm not here to change the culture overnight. I'm here to prove that I can contribute to mission success. Her teammates were supportive, but cautious. They had all been through challenging selections to earn their place on the team, and they respected what Sarah had accomplished. But combat operations would test their unit cohesion in ways that training never could. The team's senior enlisted leader, Master Chief Peterson, took Sarah aside during her first week. Chun, I'm going to be straight with you. The boys are good with you being here, but they're also protective. They know the media attention you've received, and they're worried about how that might affect operations. Don't expect special treatment, but also don't be surprised if they're a little more cautious when you're around. I appreciate the honesty, Master Chief. What do you need from me? Just be one of the team. Do your job, watch their backs, and trust them to watch yours. Everything else will work itself out. The team spent months training together before their deployment to Afghanistan. They practiced direct action raids, special reconnaissance missions, and counterterrorism operations. Sarah's intelligence background proved invaluable during mission planning sessions, where her analytical skills helped identify threats and opportunities that others might miss. During one training exercise, the team was tasked with capturing a high-value target in a simulated Afghan compound. Sarah noticed patterns in the mock enemy's communications that suggested they were walking into an ambush. Hold on, she said during the pre-mission briefing. The pattern of radio traffic doesn't match what we'd expect for a normal compound. I think they know we're coming. The team leader, Chief Williams, studied her analysis. What are you thinking, Chun? The radio discipline is too good, and there's been no normal household traffic for the past 6 hours. I think our target has been moved, and they're using the compound as bait. Williams decided to adjust the mission plan based on Sarah's assessment. When they arrived at the target location, they found exactly what she had predicted, a prepared ambush with multiple escape routes. Because of her analysis, they were able to capture the actual target and alternate location while avoiding a potentially deadly trap. Good work, Chun, Williams said after the exercise. That kind of analysis is exactly why you're here. Their first deployment came in March 2017 to eastern Afghanistan near the Pakistani border. The region was controlled by a complex mix of Taliban fighters, foreign jihadists, and tribal militias that shifted allegiances based on immediate advantage rather than ideology. Sarah's first combat operation was a night raid on a compound suspected of housing bomb makers who had been targeting coalition forces. As the team approached the target, she felt a familiar mixture of fear and excitement that every warrior knows before combat. The operation went smoothly. They captured 3 suspects and recovered significant amounts of bomb-making materials without firing a shot. But it was the aftermath that taught Sarah her first real lesson about combat operations. During the exploitation phase, where they searched the compound and interviewed capture personnel, Sarah noticed that the women and children in the compound were terrified of the male SEALs. Their cultural conditioning made them afraid to make eye contact or communicate with foreign men. Chief, let me talk to the women, Sarah suggested to Williams. They might have information about other safe houses or operations, but they're too scared to talk to you guys. Williams was initially hesitant. Separating from the team during operations went against every tactical principle they had trained for. But Sarah's suggestion made tactical sense. The conversation that followed revealed crucial intelligence about a larger network of bomb makers operating throughout the region. The women, relieved to speak with another woman, provided details about timing, locations, and personnel that led to a series of successful operations over the following weeks. Word of Sarah's effectiveness in these situations spread quickly through the special operations community. She began receiving requests from other teams to assist with operations where cultural sensitivity might provide tactical advantages. But it was during her 3rd month in Afghanistan that Sarah faced the harsh reality of what her service would ultimately cost her. The mission was supposed to be routine, a reconnaissance operation in a valley suspected of being used as a transit route for foreign fighters entering Afghanistan for Pakistan. Sarah's team was inserted by helicopter before dawn and tasked with observing and reporting enemy movement for 72 hours. They established an observation post on a ridge overlooking the valley and settled in for what they expected to be a quiet surveillance mission. For the first day, they saw normal village activity, but no signs of enemy presence. On the second day, Sarah noticed something unusual through her high-powered scope. A group of children was playing in a specific area of the village where adults had been conspicuously absent. Her years of intelligence training had taught her to look for patterns, and this one bothered her. Chief, I'm seeing something weird in Sector 3. Kids are playing right where we'd expect to see adults if this was a normal village day. Chief Williams studied the area through his own scope. What are you thinking? I think they're using the kids as early warning. If we or any other coalition forces approach, the kids will run and alert the adults. It's a common tactic in this region. Williams was about to respond when the valley erupted in gunfire. Their observation post was being targeted by accurate sniper fire from multiple positions. The enemy had known they were there all along and had spent time setting up an elaborate ambush. We're compromised, Williams shouted into his radio while bullets cracked overhead. Request immediate extraction. The firefight lasted 4 hours. Sarah's team was outnumbered and surrounded, fighting from a position that offered little cover from the crossfire. They were running low on ammunition when the rescue helicopters finally arrived, but the extraction zone was under heavy fire. We need to move to the alternate LZ, Williams shouted over the noise of gunfire and helicopter rotors. Chun, you and Rodriguez provide covering fire while we displace. Sarah positioned herself behind a rocky outcropping and began engaging enemy positions with precise rifle fire. Her marksmanship, honed through years of training, allowed her to suppress multiple enemy positions while her teammates moved to safety. That's when she saw the child. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, had wandered into the crossfire. She was crying and obviously terrified, caught between the American position and the Taliban fighters. Both sides had stopped shooting to avoid hitting her, but she was too scared to move in either direction. "Chief, there's a kid in the open." Sarah called out. "Leave her. We need to move now." But Sarah couldn't leave. Everything about her training told her to follow orders and evacuate with her team. Everything about her humanity told her she couldn't abandon a child in a combat zone. "I'm going to get her," Sarah announced. "Chun, that's an order. Get back here." Sarah ignored the command and sprinted toward the child. Enemy fire resumed immediately, bullets kicking up dust around her feet as she ran. She reached the girl, scooped her up, and ran toward the village while her teammates provided covering fire. She made it to the village and handed the child to her mother, who had been watching in terror from behind a wall. The relief in the woman's eyes was worth every risk Sarah had taken. But when she turned to run back to her team, a Taliban sniper who had repositioned during the rescue put a bullet through her shoulder. The impact spun her around and sent her sprawling in the dusty village street. "Chun is down," Rodriguez screamed into the radio. "Chun is down." Through sheer adrenaline and determination, Sarah managed to get back to her feet and stumbled toward her team's position. Master Chief Peterson ran out under fire to help her reach cover. "What the hell were you thinking?" Peterson demanded as he applied a pressure bandage to her wound. "I was thinking that's somebody's daughter," Sarah gasped, her face pale from blood loss. The extraction helicopter finally managed to land under intense covering fire from Apache gunships. Sarah's teammates carried her to the aircraft while she drifted in and out of consciousness. The flight to the field hospital was a blur of medical personnel and concerned teammates. Sarah remembers Rodriguez holding her hand and repeatedly telling her she was going to be fine. At the hospital, surgeons worked for 6 hours to repair the damage from the sniper's bullet. The round had shattered her shoulder blade and damaged several major muscle groups. When she woke up, the surgeon delivered news that would change the trajectory of her entire life. "Petty Officer Chun, the surgery was successful, but you need to understand the extent of your injuries. The damage to your shoulder is severe. With extensive rehabilitation, you might regain 70% of your range of motion, but you'll never have the full mobility required for active SEAL operations." The words hit Sarah harder than the bullet had. Her career as an operational SEAL was over. She had finally achieved her lifelong dream, only to have it taken away after less than 6 months. Her teammates visited her every day during her recovery at the hospital in Germany. Chief Williams was the first to address what everyone was thinking. "Chun, what you did out there was either the bravest thing or the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Maybe both. But I want you to know that you saved that little girl's life, and you did it knowing what it might cost you." "Was it worth it, Chief? My whole career, everything I worked for, gone because I couldn't follow orders." Williams was quiet for a long moment. "Chun, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen warriors do incredible things for incredible reasons. What you did wasn't about following orders or completing the mission. It was about being human in an inhuman situation. That's not something you could train for. That's character." When Sarah was stable enough for transport, she was moved to Walter Reed Medical Center in Maryland for the long process of rehabilitation. The physical therapy was grueling, but it was the emotional rehabilitation that proved most difficult. Sarah had defined herself as a warrior for her entire adult life. Without the ability to deploy and conduct operations, she struggled to find her identity. The special operations community rallied around her, but she felt lost and purposeless. It was during her darkest period at Walter Reed that Sarah made a decision that would ultimately define the next chapter of her life. She was going to find a way to continue serving, even if she could no longer carry a rifle in combat. She began volunteering at the hospital, working with other wounded warriors who were struggling with their own transitions. Her experience as both a SEAL and a wounded veteran gave her unique credibility with patients who were dealing with life-changing injuries. Dr. Martinez, the chief psychologist at Walter Reed, noticed Sarah's natural ability to connect with struggling veterans. "Sarah, have you ever considered becoming a counselor? You have something that can't be taught, the ability to understand what these warriors are going through because you've been there yourself." The suggestion planted a seed that would grow into Sarah's second career. She began taking college courses online, working toward a degree in psychology while continuing her own rehabilitation. As her shoulders slowly healed, Sarah made another decision that would become deeply meaningful to her. She got her first tattoo, the SEAL trident positioned over her wounded shoulder. The tattoo artist was a former Marine who had lost his leg in Iraq. "Why there?" he asked as he prepared to begin the work. "Because I want to remember what it cost," Sarah replied. "I want to remember that this scar represents someone's daughter going home to her mother." The tattoo was the beginning of a larger canvas that would tell the story of Sarah's service and sacrifice. Each additional piece would represent another chapter in her journey, another lesson learned, another life touched. But Sarah didn't know that her story was about to take another dramatic turn, one that would test her in ways that combat never had, and ultimately lead her to a moment in a veteran's center where her quiet response to a thoughtless comment would inspire an entire community. The little girl in Afghanistan was safe. Sarah's operational career was over. But her true service to her fellow veterans was just beginning. Sarah's transition from active duty warrior to wounded veteran counselor was neither smooth nor simple. After 18 months of rehabilitation at Walter Reed, she was medically retired from the Navy with full honors and a Purple Heart. At 28 years old, she found herself starting over in a world that often struggled to understand the invisible wounds that so many veterans carried home. She enrolled full-time at George Washington University to complete her psychology degree, using her GI Bill benefits and disability compensation to support herself. But the academic world felt strange after years of military structure and purpose. Classmates who complained about term paper deadlines had no concept of what real pressure looked like. It was during this period that Sarah began working part-time at the Washington Veterans Affairs Medical Center, facilitating support groups for combat veterans. Her supervisor, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, had specifically requested Sarah for the position after hearing about her work at Walter Reed. "Sarah, these veterans need to see someone who understands what they've been through," Dr. Walsh explained during her interview. "Your background gives you instant credibility that I could never earn, no matter how many degrees I have." The veterans in Sarah's groups were a cross-section of America's recent conflicts. Marines who had fought in Fallujah, soldiers who had survived multiple deployments to Afghanistan, Navy corpsmen who had held dying friends in their arms. Each carried invisible scars that were often deeper than any physical wound. During her first group session, Sarah faced a room full of skeptical warriors who had been burned by well-meaning counselors who couldn't truly understand their experiences. "So, you're supposed to help us deal with our problems?" asked Marcus, a former Army Ranger who had lost his leg to an IED in Iraq. "What makes you different from all the other shrinks they've sent us?" Sarah could have recited her credentials or tried to establish authority through her SEAL background. Instead, she chose vulnerability. "Because 6 months ago, I was lying in a hospital bed at Walter Reed, wondering if my life had any meaning now that I couldn't do the job I'd trained for my entire adult life. I understand what it feels like to lose your identity along with your ability to serve." The room went quiet. These warriors recognized authenticity when they heard it. "I'm not here to fix you," Sarah continued. "I'm here to help you figure out how to fix yourselves. Because you're not broken. You're warriors dealing with the cost of warfare." Marcus studied her for a moment. "You're the SEAL, aren't you? The one from Afghanistan." "I was a SEAL. Now I'm a student and a counselor. And most days I'm still figuring out what that means." The conversation that followed was unlike any therapy session Sarah had ever witnessed. These veterans began sharing stories, fears, and struggles with an openness that their families had never seen. They talked about survivor guilt, about nightmares, about the difficulty of feeling normal in a normal world. It was during one of these sessions that Sarah met James, a former Marine sniper whose story would profoundly impact her understanding of service and sacrifice. James had completed 4 deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, where his exceptional marksmanship had saved countless American lives. But the psychological toll of taking life, even in service to his country, had left him struggling with severe PTSD and depression. "I was good at my job," James told the group during one particularly difficult session. "Too good, maybe. I kept my brothers alive, but now I can't sleep without seeing the faces of the people I killed." The group was silent. They all understood that killing in combat was sometimes necessary, but few had dealt with the psychological aftermath of being exceptionally effective at it. "James," Sarah said gently, "you saved American lives. That's not something to feel guilty about. I know that up here," James pointed to his head, "but knowing it and feeling it are different things." Sarah understood exactly what he meant. She had struggled with her own decisions in Afghanistan, wondering if she should have followed orders instead of risking herself and her team to save one child. "Want to know something?" Sarah said. "I disobeyed a direct order in Afghanistan to save a little girl's life. It cost me my career and nearly got my teammates killed. Some days I think it was the right thing to do. Other days I think I was selfish and stupid. Most days I think it was probably both." James looked at her with surprise. "You never told us that story, because I'm still figuring out what it means. But what I've learned is that we can't let the complexity of our choices paralyze us. We made decisions in impossible situations with the information we had. That's what warriors do." Over the following weeks, James began to open up more. He talked about specific missions, about friends he had lost, about the burden of coming home alive when so many others hadn't. Sarah listened without judgment, offering perspective when appropriate, but mostly just providing a safe space for him to process his experiences. It was James who suggested that Sarah get a tattoo to commemorate their group sessions. "You should get something to remember us by," he said after a particularly breakthrough session. "Something to remind you that you're helping people heal." Sarah had been thinking about expanding her tattoo collection. The seal trident over her shoulder had been joined by coordinates representing the village where she was wounded. But James's suggestion resonated with her desire to honor the veterans she was working with. She found a tattoo artist named Miguel, a former Navy corpsman who specialized in memorial tattoos for veterans. His shop, called Honor Inc., was located in a diverse neighborhood in D.C. and had become a gathering place for military veterans. "What are you thinking?" Miguel asked as Sarah described what she wanted. "Something that represents healing. Something that shows the journey from being broken to becoming whole again." They worked together to design a phoenix rising from ashes, positioned on her forearm where she could see it every day. The bird represented rebirth and transformation, while the ashes underneath contained tiny, almost invisible letters spelling out the names of veterans who had been part of her support groups. The tattoo session took 6 hours. Miguel worked with the precision and patience that came from years of creating meaningful art for people who had served their country. "You know," Miguel said as he added the final details, "most people think tattoos are just decoration. But for warriors, they're armor. They protect the memories that matter and honor the people who shaped us." As Sarah's collection of tattoos grew, each piece told a specific story. A compass rose on her back represented guidance and finding direction after losing her way. A small anchor behind her ear symbolized her naval service and the stability she provided for other veterans. The most controversial addition was a detailed sleeve that depicted scenes from her time in Afghanistan. Critics within the veteran community argued that she was glorifying war or seeking attention. But for Sarah, the artwork served a deeper purpose. "Every image represents something I need to remember," she explained to Dr. Walsh during one of their supervision meetings. "The village where I was wounded reminds me why I serve others now. The mountains represent the beauty I found even in a combat zone. The children in the artwork remind me that there's always innocence worth protecting. Dr. Walsh had initially been concerned about Sarah's extensive tattoos affecting her credibility as a counselor. But she quickly realized that the artwork actually enhanced Sarah's connection with the veterans she served. Interesting, Dr. Walsh observed after sitting in on one of Sarah's group sessions. They trust you more because of the tattoos, not less. The tattoos tell them I'm like them, Sarah replied. I'm someone who has been marked by service in ways that can't be hidden or forgotten. They know I understand what it means to carry your experiences on your body as well as in your mind. Sarah's reputation as an effective counselor grew throughout the DC veteran community. She was asked to speak at conferences, conduct training for other mental health professionals, and consult on veteran suicide prevention programs. But it was her work with female veterans that became her specialty. As more women returned from Iraq and Afghanistan with combat trauma, Sarah found herself uniquely positioned to help them navigate challenges that male veterans might not fully understand. She began facilitating a support group specifically for female veterans, many of whom had experienced military sexual trauma in addition to combat stress. These women faced the dual challenge of dealing with war trauma while fighting for recognition that their service had been as dangerous and meaningful as their male counterparts. Nobody takes us seriously, complained Maria, a former Army convoy driver who had survived multiple IED attacks in Iraq. They see us as support personnel, not as warriors who were in the shit just like the guys. Then, we show them, Sarah replied. We show them through our actions, our success, and our refusal to be diminished by other people's assumptions. Sarah's own visibility as a female veteran with extensive combat tattoos became a form of advocacy. She refused to hide her body art or apologize for her appearance, even when attending formal veteran events where she was often the only heavily tattooed woman present. During one such event, a retirement ceremony for a senior military officer, Sarah overheard a conversation between two older veterans. Look at that girl with all the tattoos. What's the military coming to? That girl is Sarah Chun, replied the other veteran, who happened to be Rodriguez, her former teammate from SEAL training. She's a Navy SEAL who was wounded saving a child in Afghanistan. Those tattoos represent more service and sacrifice than most people will ever understand. The first veteran looked embarrassed. I had no idea. I just assumed. Exactly. You assumed. Maybe next time ask questions before making judgments. These encounters became teaching moments for Sarah. She learned to address misconceptions directly, but without anger, understanding that education was more effective than confrontation. She began writing articles for veteran publications about the meaning behind military tattoos and the importance of not judging service members based on their appearance. Her writing caught the attention of national media, and she was invited to appear on several talk shows to discuss veteran issues. Tattoos in the military have a long tradition, Sarah explained during one television interview. They represent units, deployments, fallen friends, and personal milestones. For many veterans, our tattoos are our medals that we can wear every day. The interviewer, clearly trying to be provocative, asked, but don't you think there's a difference between a small memorial tattoo and what some might see as excessive body art? Sarah smiled calmly. Who gets to decide what's excessive? And why should that matter if the person wearing the tattoos served their country with honor? The interview clip went viral in veteran social media circles, with thousands of veterans sharing their own tattoo stories and thanking Sarah for defending their choices. But Sarah's growing public profile also brought criticism from unexpected sources. Some within the veteran community argued that she was using her story for personal gain rather than genuinely serving other veterans. The criticism stung, partly because Sarah sometimes questioned her own motivations. Was she helping veterans, or was she building a career on her unusual story? The answer came during a crisis that tested everything Sarah believed about service and sacrifice. One of her group members, a young Marine named Kevin who had been struggling with severe depression, called her in the middle of the night. Sarah, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. Sarah could hear the despair in Kevin's voice and recognize the signs of someone contemplating suicide. She had been trained for this moment, but knowing what to do and actually doing it were very different things. Kevin, where are you right now? On the bridge. The one where Rodriguez jumped last year. Sarah knew the bridge. 3 veterans from the local community had taken their lives there in the past 18 months. The location had become a symbol of the epidemic of veteran suicide that plagued their community. Kevin, I'm coming to get you. Don't do anything until I get there. Promise me. Why? What's the point? I'm never going to be normal again. Sarah was already in her car, driving through the empty D.C. streets at 3 in the morning. Because you matter, Kevin. Because your life has value beyond your ability to be a warrior. Because there are people who need you to survive this. The drive to the bridge took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Sarah found Kevin sitting on the ledge, staring down at the dark water below. Police and emergency responders were already on scene, but they had been unable to establish meaningful contact with him. Kevin, Sarah called out as she approached. I'm here. Kevin turned to look at her, his face streaked with tears. You shouldn't have come. You can't save everyone, Sarah. I'm not trying to save everyone. I'm just trying to help my friend get through tonight. For the next hour, Sarah talked with Kevin about pain, about purpose, and about the possibility of finding meaning beyond the battlefield. She shared her own struggles with identity and purpose after her injury, her own moments of wondering if her life had value outside of being a warrior. You know what I learned, Kevin? We're not just warriors. We're survivors. And survivors have an obligation to help other people survive. As the sun began to rise, Kevin finally agreed to come down from the ledge. He was taken to the hospital for evaluation, and Sarah went with him to ensure he received appropriate care. 3 months later, Kevin was back in her support group, sharing his story with new members who were struggling with similar thoughts of hopelessness. Sarah saved my life that night, Kevin told the group. Not because she talked me out of jumping, but because she showed me that someone cared enough to come out in the middle of the night and sit with me in my worst moment. It was incidents like these that reminded Sarah why her work mattered. The tattoos, the public speaking, the media interviews were all secondary to the fundamental mission of helping veterans find purpose and healing after their service. As she approached her graduation from George Washington University with her psychology degree, Sarah reflected on how far she had come from the girl in Oregon who dreamed of being a SEAL. She had achieved that dream, lost it, and found something perhaps more meaningful in its place. Her tattoos had grown to cover much of her arms and back, each piece representing another veteran she had helped, another milestone in her own healing, another reminder of the cost and value of service. But she had no idea that soon, those same tattoos would become the center of a confrontation that would test everything she had learned about strength, service, and standing up for what was right. 2 years after graduating with her master's degree in counseling psychology, Sarah had built a reputation as one of the most effective veteran counselors on the East Coast. She had accepted a position at the Northern Virginia Veterans Center, a facility that served thousands of veterans from across the D.C. metro area. Her client load included active-duty military, recent veterans, and warriors who had served in conflicts dating back to Vietnam. The job was demanding but rewarding. Sarah typically saw 8 to 10 clients per day, facilitated 3 group therapy sessions per week, and consulted on crisis intervention cases throughout the facility. Her schedule was packed, but she wouldn't have it any other way. On a Tuesday morning in March 2021, Sarah was running slightly behind schedule. Her previous session had gone long because her client, a former Marine named Torres, had finally opened up about a traumatic incident from his deployment to Afghanistan. These breakthrough moments couldn't be rushed, even when they made the rest of the day more challenging. She grabbed her coffee and case files from her office and headed toward the group therapy room where she would be facilitating a session for veterans dealing with adjustment disorders. The hallway was busier than usual because of a job fair being held in the main conference room. As she walked past the waiting area, Sarah noticed a new face among the regulars. A middle-aged man in a worn military jacket sat with another veteran she recognized from previous events. The new guy was looking around the facility with the expression of someone who wasn't entirely comfortable being there. Sarah understood that expression. Many veterans struggled with seeking help for mental health issues, viewing it as a sign of weakness rather than strength. She made a mental note to introduce herself after her group session and see if he might benefit from any of their programs. What she didn't notice was how the man's expression changed when he saw her. His eyes immediately focused on the colorful tattoo sleeve that extended from beneath her rolled-up blazer. Even with her professional attire, the intricate artwork was clearly visible on her forearms and hands. She was almost past the waiting area when she heard his voice, loud enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear. "Check out the artwork on the counselor." "What's next? Face tattoos? Why so inked, lady?" The comment was followed by a chuckle that suggested he found his own observation particularly clever. The sound cut through the morning bustle of the veterans' center like a knife. Every conversation in the waiting area stopped. Veterans who had been reading magazines looked up. Staff members paused their discussions. The job fair attendees in the adjacent room turned to see what was happening. Sarah felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that she had learned to recognize and control during her years as both a warrior and a counselor. This wasn't the first time someone had made assumptions about her based on her appearance, and it wouldn't be the last. But something about the timing and the setting made this comment particularly pointed. She could have kept walking. Her group session was about to start, and she had veterans waiting who needed her attention. She could have ignored the comment and dealt with it later through proper channels. She could have responded with anger or defensiveness, proving whatever point the man thought he was making. Instead, Sarah stopped walking and turned around. The waiting area had gone completely silent, and she could feel dozens of eyes watching to see how she would respond. She took a deep breath and walked slowly toward the man who had made the comment. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice calm and clear. "I don't think we've been introduced. I'm Sarah Chun, and I'm a counselor here at the center." The man looked somewhat taken aback by her direct approach, but his expression remained skeptical. "Yeah, I figured you worked here. I'm Mike Patterson, just wondering about all the decoration." Sarah studied his face for a moment. She could see the telltale signs of someone carrying heavy burdens. The slight tremor in his hands that suggested either medication side effects or persistent anxiety. The way his eyes didn't quite meet hers directly. The defensive posture of someone expecting to be judged or rejected. "You want to know about my tattoos?" Sarah asked, her tone remaining conversational rather than confrontational. "Sure. I mean, it's a lot of ink for someone in your position." Sarah nodded thoughtfully, as if considering his question seriously. "You're right. It is a lot of ink. Each piece represents something important to me. Would you like to know what some of them mean?" The question caught Mike off guard. He had expected defensiveness or anger, not genuine engagement. "I guess." Sarah pushed up her sleeve further, revealing more of the intricate artwork that covered her forearm. "This phoenix here," she pointed to a stunning bird rising from detailed flames, "represents rebirth and transformation. It covers the scar from surgery I had at Walter Reed after I was wounded in Afghanistan." The waiting area remained silent, but Sarah could sense a shift in the atmosphere. Veterans were leaning forward slightly, their attention captured by the unexpected turn the conversation was taking. "This compass rose on my wrist represents finding direction after losing your way. I got it during my darkest period after my medical retirement, when I wasn't sure if my life had purpose anymore." Mike's expression was beginning to change from skeptical amusement to something approaching interest, though he was clearly struggling to reconcile Sarah's appearance with what she was telling him. "These coordinates here," Sarah continued, indicating small numbers tattooed near her elbow, "mark the exact location where I was wounded while serving as a Navy SEAL. They remind me every day why I do this job now." Mike's eyes widened. "You were a SEAL?" "I was, for about 6 months of operational time before I was wounded. But being a SEAL isn't what qualifies me to help veterans. What qualifies me is understanding what it feels like to lose your identity, your purpose, and your sense of worth when your military career ends." Rodriguez, her former teammate from Class 319, had been sitting quietly in the corner during the entire exchange. He stood up and approached the group that was now gathered around Sarah. "This is the woman I've told you about, Mike," Rodriguez said to Patterson. "The one who saved that little girl in Afghanistan. The one who disobeyed orders to do what was right and paid for it with her career." Sarah shot Rodriguez a look that suggested she could handle this herself, but she appreciated his support. "The sleeve on my left arm," Sarah continued, "tells the story of my deployment. Every image represents something I need to remember. This village scene is where I was wounded. These mountain peaks represent the beauty I found even in a war zone. These children represent the innocence that every warrior fights to protect." She paused and looked directly at Mike Patterson. "But the most important tattoo I have isn't visible right now. It's on my back, and it lists the names of 17 veterans I've worked with who took their own lives after returning home. 17 warriors who survived combat, but couldn't survive the battle with their own demons." The waiting area was now completely silent. Veterans were staring at Sarah with expressions of recognition and respect. Some had tears in their eyes as they recognized themselves in her story. "So when you ask why I'm so inked," Sarah continued, "the answer is that every mark on my body represents a lesson learned, a life touched, or a sacrifice made. They're not decorations. They're reminders of who I am, where I've been, and why this work matters." Mike Patterson looked around the waiting area and realized that every veteran present was now looking at him with expressions ranging from disappointment to outright hostility. He had unknowingly insulted someone who had not only served with distinction, but was dedicating her post-military life to helping others heal. I didn't know," he said quietly. "I just saw the tattoos and assumed." "You assumed that someone with extensive body art couldn't be professional or effective," Sarah said, not unkindly. "That's a common misconception. But let me ask you something. If I can help a Marine who's been considering suicide find a reason to live, does it matter what my arms look like?" Mike was struggling to find words. "No, I guess it doesn't." "Actually," Sarah said, "it does matter. Because when that Marine sees my tattoos, he knows immediately that I'm someone who understands what it means to be marked by military service. He knows I'm not some civilian who's read about war in textbooks. He knows I'm a warrior who's been where he's been." She gestured around the waiting area, where veterans were nodding in agreement with her words. "Every person in this room has been changed by their military service. Some of those changes are visible, some aren't. But we're all marked by what we've experienced. My tattoos just happen to be external representations of internal truths." Thompson, a Vietnam veteran who had been quietly listening from across the room, stood up and began walking toward the group. He was followed by Martinez, an Iraq veteran who had lost his right leg to an IED. Then Watson, a former Air Force pilot who had survived being shot down over Syria. One by one, veterans throughout the waiting area began standing and moving towards Sarah. "Ma'am," Thompson said, his voice thick with emotion, "thank you for your service. And thank you for continuing to serve." What happened next would become legend in veteran communities across the country. Without any coordination or prompting, every veteran in the waiting area began applauding. The sound drew staff members from other parts of the building, who looked on in amazement as dozens of warriors stood and clapped for the counselor who had just defended not only herself, but the right of all veterans to carry their service however they chose. The applause continued for nearly 2 minutes. When it finally died down, Mike Patterson was still standing in the center of it all, looking overwhelmed by what he had witnessed. "Ma'am," he said to Sarah, "I owe you an apology. A real one. I judged you based on your appearance, and I was completely wrong." Sarah nodded, accepting his apology with grace. "Mike, you're here because you need help with something. That's why we're all here. The question isn't whether you made a mistake just now. The question is whether you're ready to do the hard work of healing." Mike looked around at the faces surrounding him. These were his people, fellow veterans who understood what it meant to serve and sacrifice. They had just shown him what it looked like to defend one of their own. "Yes, ma'am. I'm ready." Sarah smiled. "Good." Rodriguez here will get you set up with an intake appointment. And Mike, the work we do here isn't about what anyone looks like. It's about helping warriors find their way home. As the crowd began to disperse, veterans approached Sarah one by one. Some thanked her for standing up for all of them. Others shared their own stories about being judged for their appearance or their invisible wounds. A few simply shook her hand in silent understanding. Torres, the Marine who had opened up in her previous session, waited until the crowd had thinned before approaching her. "Ma'am, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You turned someone's ignorance into a teaching moment for all of us." Torres, that man wasn't our enemy. He was a veteran in pain who made an assumption based on incomplete information. Sometimes the best thing we can do is help people understand rather than writing them off. "Is that why you didn't get angry? Even though he disrespected you?" Sarah considered the question carefully. Getting angry would have proven his point that people with tattoos are somehow unprofessional or unstable. Responding with dignity and truth showed him who I really am. "Which approach do you think was more effective?" Torres smiled. "Definitely the second one, ma'am." Later that afternoon, after her group session had ended and her individual appointments were complete, Sarah sat in her office reflecting on the morning's events. Her supervisor, Dr. Patricia Williams, knocked on her door. "Sarah, I heard about what happened this morning. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Dr. Williams. Actually, I think it was exactly what needed to happen. The entire staff is talking about how you handled that situation. You turned what could have been a confrontational incident into a powerful moment of education and community building." Sarah shrugged. "I just told the truth about what my tattoos represent. The veterans did the rest." "That's exactly my point. You trusted your community to understand and support you, and they did. That kind of leadership is rare." As Sarah drove home that evening, she thought about the morning's events and what they meant. She had spent years building her reputation as a counselor and advocate for veterans. She had given speeches, written articles, and appeared on television to discuss veteran issues. But none of that had carried the same impact as simply standing in that waiting area and explaining what her tattoos meant to a man who had judged her based on assumptions. The story of what happened that morning spread quickly through veteran social media networks. Veterans across the country shared their own tattoo stories, photos of their memorial ink, and messages of support for Sarah and other tattooed service members. A video taken by someone in the waiting area went viral, showing the moment when the veterans stood and applauded. Major news outlets picked up the story, and Sarah found herself once again in the national spotlight. But this time felt different. This time, she wasn't just representing herself or even female veterans. She was representing every warrior who had ever been judged based on their appearance rather than their service. 3 weeks after the incident, Mike Patterson completed his intake process and was assigned to one of Sarah's group therapy sessions. During his first session, he shared his story with the group. "I made assumptions about someone based on how they looked, and I was completely wrong. Sarah taught me that day that our scars, whether they're visible or invisible, are part of who we are. They don't diminish us. They make us who we are." Sarah smiled as she listened to Mike's words. This was why she did the work. Not for the recognition or the viral videos, but for moments like this when understanding replaced judgment and warriors learned to see strength in places they hadn't expected to find it. As the session ended and the veterans began filing out, Rodriguez approached her. "You know what you did that day was special, right? You didn't just defend yourself. You defended all of us." "Rodriguez, I just told the truth. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it changes everything," he replied. Sarah looked around the empty group therapy room, thinking about all the veterans she had worked with over the years. Each had their own story of service and sacrifice. Each had their own way of carrying the weight of their experiences. Some expressed it through tattoos, others through art or writing or music. Some carried it silently, invisible to the outside world. But they were all warriors, all deserving of respect and understanding. And sometimes it took just one moment of truth-telling to remind everyone of that fundamental fact. Sarah Chun had started her journey as a girl from Oregon who dreamed of being a Navy SEAL. She had achieved that dream, lost it through sacrifice, and found something perhaps more meaningful in its place. Her tattoos told that story, chapter by chapter, scar by scar, lesson by lesson. And on a Tuesday morning in March, in a veteran center in Northern Virginia, that story became a reminder to an entire community about what strength really looks like and why service takes so many different forms. The applause had ended, the crowd had dispersed, but the message remained. Never judge a warrior by their scars, because you never know what battles they've fought to earn them.